Welcome back to Unapologetically Visible, the podcast for high achieving Latina and women of color founders who are done being the best kept secret. I'm your host, Christina Olivarez, award winning visibility and leadership coach, TEDx speaker, and founder and CEO of the Social Butterfly Gal and Hustle and Socialize. 2025 stretched so many of my clients this year, whether they were seasoned founders or founders who were working on scaling and growing their businesses and their personal brands. I feel for many of the brilliant women of color founders that I coach, 2025 really revealed the hidden barriers that were holding them back from their next level visibility and leadership that they were desiring for. Today's topic is all about the 6 visibility and leadership barriers that my clients were facing in 2025 and the lessons that were being revealed throughout our coaching sessions. I coached over 25 to 30 private coaching clients this year, and I'm hoping this episode allows you to see some of the barriers that were holding my clients back and helps you to recalibrate as you start mapping out your Q1 or Q2 of 2026 strategy. This year, I coached women through 4 core offers. Private coaching, which is my most intimate, high level proximity container. This is my long term container. VIP days and intensives, which are more of those one offs and the deep dive strategy. And then my monthly group power hour trainings and hot seat coaching sessions. So I worked one-on-one with clients over a 90-minute intensive to a 1-day or a long-term 3 to 6 month coaching container. And between all that, I coached many Latina and women of color founders that were making anywhere between $75,000 to $250,000 more in revenue. Each of these clients have a wide range of industries and businesses that expand through service-based CEOs, whether they're therapists, fitness trainers, web designers, consultants and other coaches, marketing strategists, coaches who were desiring for more visibility, creators who have already outgrown their local markets, and founders who are navigating all of the different complexities of motherhood and being a CEO. And a lot of my clients often don't need handholding. They already know how to execute. They just really need that strategic guide that is going to help them really map out where they need to go within their visibility and also help them get mentored and coached in the way that is really next level. A lot of my clients are very emotionally mature, they're high achieving, and they're respected in their industries. They carry a lot of responsibility culturally and in their family and all of the many pressures of showing up and growing that deal with their businesses. And this year, I noticed 6 recurring barriers that were showing up with every single client in the bulk of my coaching containers. And these barriers were really not allowing them to expand fully in the ways that they really wanted to expand. And through coaching these women and providing strategic advising, consulting, mentoring, and deep coaching, they were having massive breakthroughs. And so I wanted to share the top 6 barriers and also give you some language as to what you may be feeling and try to offer you a path forward in the breakthroughs that you are hoping to have in 2026. So barrier number 1, they were leading their businesses from a past identity, an identity that they had already outgrown. This one showed up in about 85% of my private coaching clients this year. The majority of my clients are seasoned business owners and they've led their businesses for over 5+ years, which means that not only have they evolved as a person, as a woman, but they've also have evolved with their business models and their audiences. There was a common theme that I was starting to notice with every single one of my clients, which was their personal identities were evolving faster than their brands and their business models. I would often hear these comments in a coaching session. Christina, I don't know why my content isn't landing anymore with my audience. Christina, I feel very disconnected from my offers. Christina, my audience feels very different. Or maybe I'm just no longer aligned with the audience that I'm targeting. And I think I need to either move away from that audience segment or think about how to attract the right audience that's going to buy my offers. And that's the thing, is that when you are building a business and you start to evolve within your own self, your businesses may still be designed from a past version of yourself. Maybe it could be from a past season or a past level of consciousness. And many women that I coach, they started their businesses at either a young age. Many of them could have been single and then throughout the course of their business have gotten married. They maybe have started families or have added on to their family. And some of the women that I've also coached have become empty nesters, and now they have way more time to be able to focus on themselves and their businesses. And now they're in a different season of life where they're thinking, okay, what's next? And when your identity starts to expand, sometimes that's where your messaging and your audience gets left behind because it's not catching up to all of the different ways that you are evolving. So you start to feel like an outsider in your own business that you've built. I had a client in a VIP day this fall who had built her business around helping beginners. And 5 years ago, that made sense. It was aligned with her story, her lived experience, and her mastery at her skill at that time. And one of the things that we started to dive into our coaching sessions was around this specific question. When did you outgrow the identity that this offer was built around? And I swear, when we really started to get down to the nitty gritty of her business and her offer and her messaging, you could already kind of see the wheels turn in her head and that light bulb moment just like clicked for her. It was because in that moment, my client realized that her business was not falling apart and that she needed to burn it all down, but it was the simple fact that her identity had expanded and her brand hadn't caught up to where she was now going. And anytime that that happens, whether you have this moment in your own personal development and your own personal growth, anytime that happens, you might feel really misaligned with the messaging because you are now speaking from a place of where you're not at anymore. And so your audience starts to feel a lot more misaligned. Barrier number two is that they were protecting their audience's comfort more than holding their own capacity. My clients were exhausted in 2025, emotionally, physically, mentally. I mean, just pure exhausted. And it wasn't because they were busy or being productive. Many of my clients were really, really productive. It was because they were over functioning. They were also watching the world shift before our own very eyes. You know, we started the year in 2025 navigating all of the DEI eliminations, the political strife, our economic instability that was happening. And I could tell that there were so many shifts within my clients and their audience when it came to their audience's behavior and understanding how to continue to keep the stability with their revenue and their take-home pay when we were dealing with an economy that was very volatile. And so many of my clients were over delivering and really undercharging because they were very nervous about charging their rates as the economy was shifting. They were also really nervous about utilizing their voice to speak up on certain issues, especially when it came to wanting to avoid conflict and terrified to disappoint anyone that was in their audience or their orbit for fear of retaliation and not wanting to work with them for speaking out on their core values and the mission of their companies. So this year I really started to watch my clients apologize for having boundaries. Many of them were coming to me needing that deep leadership coaching around building the boundaries within their business or maybe even around their emotional capacity when it came to their rest. And a lot of them were also really wanting to not feel the push and pull tie of understanding how to deepen their leadership when the market is unstable. One of my private clients said something so heartbreaking in a session. She had said, Christina, I don't want my clients to think that I'm too much. And that right there is our cultural conditioning. We are conditioned to feel like if we show up in our most authentic self, that many people will not want to engage or they will hit that unfollow button or not even want to work with us because they feel like we are too much. That's the invisibility tax that we pay when we don't want to be a burden or be perceived as difficult. And so we dilute our message or we get really nervous about showing up as our full self on camera or on podcasts and on stages. But let me tell you this, and something that I feel was a really powerful breakthrough for that client as we were working together in our coaching relationship. Every time that you protect someone else's comfort at the expense of yours and your capacity, you sacrifice the leader that you're becoming. So your energy is your most strategic asset. Your boundaries are part of your brand. And it's really important to understand when to say no and understand which visibility opportunities are actually going to be moving the needle in your business. Whether you are really scared about saying no to a speaking opportunity that you know in the long run, you're not really going to get paid for it. Maybe it's just for exposure. It's really important to understand what type of boundaries that you need to put into your capacity, because that is the foundation of how you really work to grow your leadership and also your business. Barrier number 3 was that they tried to raise their revenue without really understanding how to recalibrate their visibility. Women came to me saying, I know my work is powerful, but why do I still feel invisible? Or I want to raise my rates, but I feel like my visibility doesn't match the pricing. And so why would anybody want to work with me if I'm not showcasing who I am online, or if I don't have that big following and seeming like an expert? Why would anybody want to work with me? Many of my clients were really trying to climb financially while also not putting themselves out there and being really invisible online. And I think it's really important to also stress that visibility doesn't mean you have to be constantly posting on social media. There are other factors that come into play when we think about being visible as a leader. And a lot of those have to deal with also non social media related opportunities. That could be speaking on stages and being visible on that end, or getting on other people's podcasts and sharing your expertise and your wisdom, or hosting a training online or a webinar. There are many different factors that come into play when we think about growing your personal brand and being visible online. But many of my clients were choosing to not really put themselves out there for that fear of being too visible, because there is that vulnerability that comes with the visibility, right? Visibility is really that being rooted in the embodiment of your identity. And it's really pushing past through certain barriers that you might have from a generational perspective, or even the barriers that you have within yourself and believing in yourself. It's really important to understand that when you are fully embodied in your messaging and in your visibility, it's a difference between talking at your audience and speaking from that expert and the place of authority. This year, I helped my clients shift from that need of perfected, polished content to more honest and identity driven messaging that really spoke to their audience and made them feel like they were in their head. I also help my clients shift to more of that expertise and emotional resonance in their brand and allow them to evolve their content. Because I think what is so important is all of the content pieces and the shifts in the trends that have happened because of TikTok and Instagram. Many of us were creating content that was very surface level, or maybe it was a how-to content. And when I'm working with coaches and clients, service-based business owners who are charging really high ticket rates, that type of content is not going to resonate and isn't going to move the needle to get somebody to actually make an investment in a 4 or 5 figure investment. And so I really help my clients shift their content and their messaging to more of that perspective driven content where you're getting an understanding of who they are and how they think, and all of the different factors that come with building their business, and who they are as a leader and as a person, because that's how you build the know, like, trust factor. We also focused on shifting convenience pricing. And I know this is a really hard mantra to think about when we're in an economy that's truly up and down, but I help them shift to a more calibrated pricing, and helping them to also not dilute their voice with more content, but helping them understand the different formats of content that's going to help them have more of an embodied voice. And when they did all of this, when they started to see those breakthroughs happen, that's when their visibility really cracked open. Their voice started to deepen, and you could tell that their audience was shifting. Many of them would tell me that a lot of their audience would send them DMs saying, "Oh my goodness, it feels like you were in my head." And that's when their revenue and profit started to really stabilize, because they were attracting and being a magnet for their most aligned buyer. And their self-trust grew even more. Barrier number 4 is they avoided making decisions because they were terrified of making the wrong decision. Let me tell you this. I feel like so many people can relate to this if you are listening to this episode. Even if you're not a client, I think one of the things that we know as business owners and just women in general is that indecision is the most expensive habit that my clients carried throughout this whole year. And I'm here to tell you that a lot of my clients didn't lack clarity. It was so funny because in a lot of the coaching sessions that we're doing, sometimes my clients would say, "I don't know. I don't know." And the thing is that they did know. They know exactly the direction that they wanted to take. They know exactly like how they want to have their message. Anytime we would really dig deeper in the "I don't know," you could tell that they really knew what they wanted to do. They were just scared and feeling very fearful. And it wasn't because they lacked that clarity. It was because they lacked trust, most importantly within themselves. I really believe that a barrier that many of us have is understanding how to take risk, but most importantly, how to take calculated risk. Because many of the women that I work with in my coaching, they've already taken risks. I mean, they've invested in high ticket coaching, they've made strategic moves, they've done all these things to help grow their businesses. But sometimes when they've made those risks, the results didn't end up in the way that they would hope for. And so it left a huge wound, it left some residue. And now, anytime they think about actually making big investments in their business, they come from that fear. And so the common indecision patterns that I saw from my clients included indecisions around raising their prices, raising their rates, and charging more because of the economy, and fearing that their audience just wasn't going to make that investment because of the fact that the economy was really up and down. We saw common indecision patterns around actually niching down and afraid to alienate the customer segments that they were already targeting, even though it wasn't working and they knew they needed to get a little bit more narrow and a little bit more clear. Some of the other indecision patterns was letting go of an offer, especially if it wasn't aligning with the direction that they're headed in their business or even in their current season of life. And that's where indecisions around pivoting were starting to come into play. So for example, some of our sessions would start with my clients saying, "Okay, I'm thinking about niching down, but," and it's in that but right there. That's where they stayed stuck, because it was like, okay, I know what I want to do, but instead of and, right? So I had this client this summer who spent about 4 months prior to working with me one-on-one debating a simple yet very, very important shift in her messaging. And when she finally made the decision to pivot her messaging and kind of lock in on this one detail in her messaging, that's when, oh my goodness, she tripled her monthly revenue within those 50 days of our coaching container. And so making the decision wasn't the hard part. It was holding the discomfort that change brings. And as Latina women of color founders, we inherit a fear of being wrong. We inherit pressure to do everything the right way. It's that perfectionism that we carry, right? We're too afraid of actually making a decision and then making a mistake, when it's really just lessons and data we're collecting that allows us to say, all right, okay, that didn't work out, but here's what I know now, and here's what I'm going to do to make sure that that lesson doesn't repeat itself again. We internalize that making mistakes in our decisions is dangerous, and it is a huge risk that we have as business owners. And this year, the women who grew the most, the clients that were seeing the biggest returns on their investment in coaching, or even just really great ROI, were the clients who were choosing decisiveness over perfection. Barrier number 5 was that they compensated with more instead of refining what matters. We are drilled with messages on the internet that more is always better. And in fact, for me personally, in 2025, my word of the year was expansion. And at the beginning of the year, I saw it a different way, right? Expansion, more, growing, whatever. And towards the end of the year, I have a very, very different perspective about the word expansion. And you see, my clients were really drilled and locked in to those messages of more, posting more, creating more offers, trying more platforms, consuming more courses and trainings, doing more visibility strategies, investing in more tools, more, until they were completely burned out. And through our coaching sessions, they started to understand and realize, especially when we started looking at their numbers and their data, that sometimes more doesn't necessarily mean it's going to move the needle in your business. In fact, sometimes more starts to dilute your authority, because now people are trying to figure out what you offer, who you are, what you are known for. And if you keep throwing messages of more, they are going to get very, very confused. And so we have been taught that doing more and working hard and grinding and doing all the things is going to create that success, right? If I don't do more, then how am I going to be successful? Because of course, the more I do, the more money I make, the more blah, blah, blah. And one thing that was really prevalent in all of my clients this year, besides that barrier, was around discernment. Because discernment starts to create success. This year, my work with my clients was not about adding more onto their plate. It was about getting very, very clear and simplifying what they already had and doubling down on what was actually moving the needle in their business. So the moment that we started to simplify their business model and their offers, that's when you started to see more of that growth. Their voice was becoming sharper. Their message was becoming stronger. And their leadership was starting to become way more clear. Which leads me to the final barrier. Barrier number 6. They didn't build enough space for tracking data, evaluating, covering, or even recalibrating. So many of my clients were doing more. And sometimes a lot of that more did not come with actual data tracking. I'm a huge data-driven CEO. In my coaching, I truly believe that data is the one thing that we need to have that will answer a lot of your questions that you have and also provides the truth. And of course, there is, that notion of logic and facts with Delulu and doing all of the woo-woo things, right, in your business, because a lot of that comes from, the higher self and the ability to lead yourself in a way that's really great for your future self. But number one, across the board, every single client, regardless of their income level, their revenue level, what they were taking home, every single client this year that I worked with struggled with not having enough space to evaluate and recalibrate. They were not giving themselves time to truly evaluate all of the different things within their business and their offers and their business model. Immediately, if they would go into a launch season or a launch campaign, they would launch something. And then if the results didn't equal to what they were hoping was going to happen or what they projected, immediately they would want to burn it all down and change course and launch something else because they think that, okay, if this didn't work, maybe I got to launch a course next, or maybe I got to launch a group coaching or a membership or a digital offer or a course, when really what they really needed to do was give them space to actually track what went right or what went wrong and how they actually feel in their body of what they want to reimagine and recreate moving into relaunching if they wanted to launch the offer again. So leading up to a launch, they weren't understanding the fullness of their audience or maybe some of the conversations that they were having with their prospects. They weren't giving themselves space to actually take that data and really dissect it and understand it like fully, and giving themselves space to recalibrate from a really empowered space. They weren't honoring the seasonality of their growth, and they weren't letting themselves recover. When you are operating with no data or even strategies that are not even congruent to where the market is in this current moment, because maybe you were operating from the market that was 6 months ago or a year ago, which so many things can happen even in a day-by-day basis in our market. Sometimes when you're operating in a different season, you will easily notice that your current offer might be in misalignment with your audience's current buying habits. And if you do not pause, you misdiagnose what's actually happening in your audience segment and in your business model. And that's why recalibrating is so important. It doesn't have to be this big thing, but it can really mean just taking some time to look in between the different quarters and taking a look at your numbers and the data in order to make those strategic decisions. So I want to ask you right now to, sit, have a little notebook next to you. And I feel like these two questions are going to help you kind of get an idea of where to look at these current barriers and see where you can maybe move forward in 2026. So I want you to ask yourself, which of these 6 barriers have been quietly running your business this year? Which of these 6 barriers do you feel like you've experienced this year? And then ask yourself, what would my next level self do tomorrow morning? If you want support with recalibrating your identity as a leader, refining your message, elevating your visibility, stepping into premium pricing, rebuilding your self-trust and your leadership capacity, and becoming unmistakably and unapologetically visible, this is your invitation to work with me privately in one-on-one coaching in 2026. One-on-one intensives, VIP days, and my private coaching containers for Q1 are officially open for enrollment. You can send me a DM on Instagram or visit my website to apply now. The links will be in the show notes below. If you resonated with this episode, here's what I want you to do next. Subscribe and leave a review, because that helps this podcast reach more women like us, women who were never meant to stay hidden, women who are meant to be highly visible leaders. Share this episode with someone you love who has been quietly going through different barriers in their business. And DM me on Instagram at the Social Butterfly Gal. Tell me your biggest reframe or your biggest breakthrough from today's conversation. And if you're feeling the call to go deeper, to recalibrate your personal brand, leadership, and your visibility, I would love to support you through one-on-one coaching. You can find the coaching information and offers in the links in the show notes below, or send me a DM with the word coaching, and I'll personally walk you through what offers are in alignment with your current season and what it looks like to step in this next era with clarity, confidence, and unapologetic authority. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening and for all of the shares and reviews. Remember, you didn't come this far to play safe. You came here to be unapologetically visible. I'll see you next week.